All right, guys, welcome back to episode 003 of the Southern U podcast, where we try to educate landowners here in the Southeast for anything from management practices to habitat improvement. And in this case, for this episode, we're going to be talking about harvest expectations for whitetail deer here in the South.
Mm-hmm.
We have, if you notice, if you're watching this, we are down a man today. We're down. Jeremy texted us at about 5 o'clock this morning and said, "Hey guys, pretty sick, not gonna make it." And we said, "Please don't."
Yeah, pukers don't get around me.
No, we don't play that game.
They're a no-go.
Nope, not at all. So, but yeah, you guys maybe throw a prayer up for Jeremy. Hope he gets to feeling better quickly. But today we do have a really good episode in store for you. My name's Taylor McMurtrey of Broadside Marketing and Branding. I'll be kind of co-hosting this thing with the man, the myth, the AL deer legend, Matt Brock, also a wildlife biologist too. So yeah, this is something that I have been pretty excited about trying to dive into because I see this kind of stuff debated online all the time. I feel like hunters attack each other a lot more than they support each other for the most part, and it's kind of silly. But I feel like kind of the birth of, or not the birth of, maybe the explosion of the social media kind of boom and hunting shows and stuff like that, they make you feel like a loser if you don't shoot 170-inch deer every year consistently, no matter what, no matter where you live. Like you're a loser if you don't do that, you know. And so I think that especially here in the South, and I mean anywhere in the country for sure, but here in the South, it just needs to be said, and we need to talk about that's a different planet, right? That's a different, completely separate category than it is here in the South.
Right.
Things aren't the same. So, and a lot of people don't have access to the farms that these guys that you're watching kill, 200 plus inch deer, 170 plus inch deer on a consistent basis. We don't have, the average person doesn't have access to that. So, I'm pretty excited about today's episode. We're going to get to pick the biologist's brain a little bit, and you'll get to hear me not say a whole lot, except for when I stick up for the rest of us, the little guys, the lay people who aren't biologists and don't have the knowledge and the know-how. So I'll be taking up for us, like, well, what if I just want to shoot something?
Go ahead,
Mr. Biologist. Can I just shoot something? So Matt, let's jump right into this, man. This was all kind of Matt's idea to kind of bring this episode. We had some other stuff planned that we're going to talk about, but just kind of felt like this is something that is a little bit more pressing, I guess, a little bit more of a hot topic. So when we're talking about harvest expectations for deer in the South, I mean, obviously we're here in Alabama. Even within the state of Alabama, I'm here in Marshall County, as we talked about on the last episode, a vacuum. There's just it's kind of a weird thing that there's not as many deer here as other counties, but you're in Fayette, so you got, a little bit more to work with there than we do.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, what is the average landowner, the guy that has 40 acres of family land that he gets to hunt, or the person who, gets in a lease by himself around here, which is kind of rare, but that maybe doesn't have thousands and thousands of acres to hunt and thousands to manage and do this kind of stuff. But, what is the kind of, where do we start on that kind of harvest expectation for those type of people?
So the first thing that I do when I meet with a landowner or a leaseholder is find out, what are your objectives? What are you trying to accomplish? What would you like to kill? Let's set some age limits or some age boundaries. Are you trying to get deer to a certain age class? Are you trying to grow 120-inch deer, 130-inch deer? All those are important because it helps me understand, what they expect out of the property. And once I know that, then I can do one of two things. I can say, okay, you have the ability to reach your objectives, or I'm going to have to tone you down a little bit because you've watched too many hunting shows from the Midwest, or you've been talking to too many people who own 5,000 acres in the Black Belt, and, for the average guy, what they're able to accomplish is not reasonable, and it's not going to happen. So, I try to find out what their objectives are. And once I know that, we start making recommendations based off baseline data. So if I don't have data from that particular property, I try to find data from properties that are in close proximity. Find out, what's the main beam length average on a 2-year-old deer, 3-year-old deer, 4-year-old deer. You can get some of that data from the state. You can get it from clubs and properties that have taken that data. So if you're not taking data, start taking data. And it doesn't have to be elaborate data. Just take something.
Yeah.
Just body weights. If I can have an average body weight, average antler score per age class, main beam length, basal circumference, number of points, inside spread, those type things, that helps out a lot. On does, age, lactation. Lactation is very important. Get your weight. And on lactation, that's easy to check. You can just pull on the teat early in the season, milk's probably going to come out, okay, and you'll know if that doe is lactating or not. But if you're farther along in the season, you may have to actually take your knife and cut through the milk sac, which a lot of you folks can't do anymore because you drop them off straight at the processor as soon as you pull the trigger. But you need to start collecting data. It just helps us make better decisions because I tell people all the time, if you give me crappy data, I'm going to give you crappy recommendations. I don't have anything to work off of.
Right.
So the more data, the better the recommendations. But, realistically speaking, in the state of Alabama with our current regulations and the bag limits that we have, if you can grow deer on the average property to 3 or 4 years of age, then those deer should likely be eligible for harvest. It's super tough to grow deer older than those age classes because there's just too many people on the landscape.
Yeah.
And there's too many cameras in the woods. And if you have a 120-inch 3-year-old, which is potentially your next superstar, I guarantee you're not the only one that has that deer on camera.
Right, sure. Well, and I think it's funny that you say that, too, because I know a lot, you're going to hear us compare and contrast Midwest versus South, because there's a lot of Midwest data out there, and there's a lot of, a lot more even video out there for whether you're, throwing stuff out on YouTube or if it's an actual show, on a network or something like that. But most of that stuff doesn't take place here for good reason. Right.
Yep.
But I would like for you maybe to talk about the maybe the difference between, like you said, hey, there's too many people in the woods, and and like you're not the only person that's got that deer on camera. So is that kind of something that's more, I won't say exclusive, but more Southeast centric than in the Midwest,
Well, if you travel across the United States, you think, I used to think, Kansas, Iowa, all these places are remote. They're really not. There's a farm on every 100 acres out there. But oftentimes they're not inhabited, or, the family's moved off, or the kids are going back to their, they've gone to school, or they've moved to town and nobody's living in those homes. But I think the bigger factor is they have a lower deer density. And because they have a lower deer density and the area is so wide open, they also have lower bag limits. So although we have a lot more deer, we have higher bag limits, there's also a lot more people in the woods. And it's super difficult for deer to survive to those older age classes. And before I get too far, do not misunderstand what I'm saying. Is like, I'm not picking on people that choose to shoot any legal deer.
Sure.
It is well within your legal right to do that.
Dang right it is.
You better believe it. And, you shoot whatever makes you happy. As long as you're doing it legally, I don't care. The problem I have is when you have those people also complaining about not being able to harvest mature bucks.
Right.
Which I encounter quite often. I'm like, well, that's simple. Quit pulling the trigger. Just stop pulling the trigger.
That's right.
But I saw a buck. I don't care if you saw a buck. If you want to kill him when he's 5, you can't shoot him when he's 2 or 3.
That's right. Yep.
So, that's a choice they're going to have to make. But, as far, let's go back just for a moment and talk about the hunter density thing. One thing that is unique to the South are clubs
Yep.
And large leases where you've got 20, 30, 40, sometimes over 100 members.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And, on any given Saturday, or let's just say opening weekend, for instance, you may have 20 people on 2,500 acres.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's you're you've got a hunter per 100, a little over 100 acres. Whereas if you were hunting public land on Black Warrior Wildlife Management Area on that opening day hunt, you may have 350 to 400 hunters on almost 40,000 acres.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 900 to 1,000 acres to yourself.
Right.
So, that is a key factor as well. So when you've got somebody, you're turning loose, 20 or 30 hunters on 2,000 acres every weekend for 3.5 months.
Mm-hmm.
Harvest potential is really high. So you have to be careful what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody thinks, well, if I just kill one buck or 2 bucks, it's not that big of a deal. Well, over the broad landscape, it is when everybody's doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, you just kind of have to watch your harvest. We should probably touch on, and I've got all these antlers laying around. We'll talk about this in just a few minutes, but I've been asked how many mature bucks can I expect to kill on my lease.
Mm-hmm.
And as a general rule of thumb, and this can vary widely, if you have a mature buck to hunt per 150 to 300 acres, that's pretty good.
Okay.
That's pretty good. I mean, there's areas that are going to be better than that,
Mm-hmm.
but just generally speaking across the landscape where you have 40 to 100 acre landowners, every few acres is owned by someone different, and
Right.
you have, X amount of people hunting over that landscape. If you can successfully produce a 4-year-old buck or older
Mm-hmm.
per 150 to 300 acres, that's pretty good.
Okay.
Now, what should you expect out of those? And I've got a few here, just as an example. This deer here scored 120 on the nose. This is a 120-inch buck. He's got 20-inch main beams, 8 to 9-inch tines.
Yeah.
He's a respectable deer. And this was a 5-year-old deer. He weighed 202 pounds.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this may be the part that sets the biologist off, but
Yeah.
that deer walks by me with my bow in my hand, it's gonna get an arrow slung at it. I
Absolutely.
promise. And I've like you were saying, reeling in expectation, but all that stuff kind of has to be adjusted to, like you said earlier, what are you trying to manage for?
Right.
What are your expectations, or what are you trying to accomplish?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I mean, I would be tickled to death to take that deer
yeah.
out there with a bow and arrow, especially.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know what I mean? But,
Absolutely.
somebody else may not. Somebody go, oh my gosh, I can't believe you'd shoot something like
Right.
that.
Well,
But,
and years ago, I made the decision. I'm no longer worried about antler score.
Nope.
I don't give a flip what they score.
Right.
I'm hunting mature deer. I don't care if they score 105 or 155. That's what drives me, and that's what I prefer to do. Other people, if there's a 3-year-old 140 standing in a food plot and a 5-year-old 110, they're going to shoot that 3-year-old 140 every single time, and there's nothing wrong with that. If it meets their objectives, that's fine.
Yep.
But it's just different strokes for different folks. But if you want to know what an average mature buck that's 4 to 5 years of age in Alabama is going to look like, you're looking at it 14 to 15 inches wide, 19 to 21-inch main beam, score somewhere between 115 and 125. That's going to be the majority of your deer. And while we're on that, I just want to say that it's in a bell curve as far as antler development goes.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have a few deer well below 100 inches. And the closer you get to 120, you're going to have a higher proportion or percentage of those deer in that class. Then you're going to taper off, and you're going to get your few 140s, 50s, 60s, and above. Those are super freaks. I mean, they're freaks of nature. They're not common. Even in the Midwest, they're not as common as what a lot of people think they are.
No, I mean, I've hunted Missouri, I've hunted Illinois, and I've hunted Kentucky. Kentucky was public land; the other two were private. And I'm telling you, if you go up there, is there more deer that would score 150 plus
Mm-hmm.
in those states?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. However, does that mean there's one behind every blade of grass and every tree?
No.
It's not like that,
No.
and people kind of have an unrealistic expectation of those states as well,
Right.
depending on what they're trying to do. But
Right. But anyway, I've got a few other things around here. This particular deer here, and the only reason I'm showing this is just as an example.
It's awesome.
It is awesome, but this is likely, at least as far as I know, the oldest deer that I've ever killed. He was at least 8 and possibly older. But here's a shed.
You guys aren't. If you're listening to this, I feel sorry for you because you need to jump on YouTube and watch it because it's got some cool stuff to show you.
Yeah, so you can see from approximately 5 years of age. He dropped this shed in 2019. So between 5 and 8 years of age, you can see that he lost a little bit of main beam length. He lost mass. He lost hind length. He had his best rack between 5 and 6 years of age. And typically speaking, that's generally what I see. Sometimes 7, 8. I've even seen deer produce their best rack at 8 or 9 years old. That's unlikely, but it does happen. Deer are kind of like people, and it's hard to get people to understand. They ask me all the time, "Well, Matt, I've got this 5 to 6 year old deer, and he's a 6 point. What's wrong with him?" And I'm like,
Nothing's wrong.
Absolutely
with him.
nothing's wrong with him. No, look, all of us, even if we're fed the same diet and raised by the same parents, we're not all going to be Shaquille O'Neal or Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. You've got little puny runts like me, no matter what we eat. So, you can pump all the nutrition you want to deer.
Yeah.
And you're still bound by their genetic limitations. And they're only going to produce what they're genetically capable of producing. But you're not going to get there unless you give them birthdays. They've got to have some age on them. But deer like this deer scored 116, and I was 3. This is one of my proudest moments killing this deer with my bow last year.
Oh, yeah,
and he's a 116-inch deer. I've definitely killed larger, lots larger, but this was a.
So now, one thing I was going to ask you about that, you said that he's 8, possibly 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that? I think that's something that I'd like for you, if you could, just to kind of touch on, because people talk about jawbone. And
jawbone.
Look at their jawbone. Look at their teeth, and look at now. Like, is it just like history? You've got
the history,
the trail camera pictures of him.
Yes, the history with that particular deer. You can focus in on certain antler characteristics and follow a deer through its entire lifetime. You just got to know what to look for. And it's not always antlers. It can be notches in the ear. It can be patches on the throat. It can be the coloration around the nose and the lips. You'll start figuring out what to look for with individual, even behaviors. You can tell one deer from 1 year to the next, even according to their behavior. So, just pay attention to things like that. But, gosh, what were we talking about?
That's funny. You said the characteristics. I had one on camera for like 3 years in a row. Still don't know what happened to him. I don't know if somebody killed him or whatever, but a very puny, very scrawny 7 point that was at least, because I know I've got pictures of him for 3 years. He's at least 4 years old, and anyways, he had something was up with one of his ears, and one ear we would either call him droopy or or broken ear, whatever. Just and I would get him on camera all the time.
Oh yeah,
I've never laid eyes on him actually in the middle of a hunt or anything. So.
Yeah, we've had a flop. He had a broken ear, and I mounted the deer that way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when I killed him, I took him to the taxidermist. I was like, "You've got to mount this deer with a broken ear." He's like, "You want?" I said, "Yes." I wouldn't mount him if you're not going to mount him with a broken ear. I don't even want to mount him at all.
That's funny.
But yeah. So what we're talking about is like knowing the age of deer on the tooth wear aging technique. I'm really torn on how accurate that is because I've seen too many exceptions to the rules that you learn in school.
I mean, is it not based on kind of diet too? If you're eating,
yeah. So, well, just like with our, the wear on our teeth, diet, genetics to a deer, even soil type can affect the wear on their teeth. So, there's lots of things at play when you're aging a deer. Now, there's a lot of biologists out there that say they know how to age deer based off tooth wear aging techniques. Some of them do, and some of them don't. And I've seen it firsthand. They they take the courses and they pass a few tests on how to age a deer, and they just look for certain things, and they're not willing to continually learn. And if you pay attention to jawbones and the way that deer's teeth age and how they wear, it's an individual thing. They're all individuals. So you can't always say, well, because of A, B, or C, this deer's 5 years old. That may or may not be the case, especially after they get 3. If they're 3 or older, a lot of times, if I don't have any history with the property, if somebody just randomly hands me a jawbone and I know nothing, I'll say, well, he may be 4. He could be 3. He could be 5. He could be 7.
Yeah.
But he's a mature deer.
Right.
He's middle-aged or older.
Right.
Once you start aging jawbones on a particular property for extended period of time and you kind of see how those deer age, then you can get a little more accurate. But I really lump them into 3 categories: fawn, 1-year-olds, or 2+.
Okay.
Because once they've replaced all of their teeth, they got all their teeth at 2. Once they receive all of them, there's so many factors at play on tooth wear aging.
And that's, well, I mean, you can prove that. Like, well, I know they've replaced their teeth, but beyond that, it's like, okay.
Yeah, and one way that I was able to determine that, I question how accurate that method is by tracking deer from year to year. And when we do kill them on a certain property, and I look at the jawbone and I'm like, that's just not what I was expecting. Because I know that deer's 6, or I know that deer's 4, and he's got the jawbone of a 3-year-old, So that deer, this 8-year-old deer, if I showed you trail camera pictures of that deer, you'd look at him and say, oh, gosh, yeah, I mean, he's obviously old. He's sagging brisket, big pot belly, back was sagging. He just had the wrinkles around his eyes and things that started to droop. And his jawbone says he's 4.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Anybody you hand it to would not tell you that jawbone's any older than 4.
Wow.
So
that's wild.
And it's happened to multiple deer that, like I said, I just know of too many exceptions.
Yeah, well, that's cool. I mean, something that, like we talked about before, things that you always believe to be true, and all of a sudden you find out maybe there's not quite as much truth to them, like a buck track versus a doe track, or or droppings. Like I was always taught, it was raised that if you find droppings that are clumped together like that, oh, that's a buck for sure. And whenever you said that, I was like, say anything.
The truth of that is, a lot of times those that are clumped together are deer that were bedded down and their bodies are not active. So their poop it's been sitting in their colon, sitting there, just waiting to be expelled, and it's clumped up.
Yeah. It
has nothing to do with how big the deer is or how old the deer is or what sex it is. It was an inactive deer, and when it got up and became active, it pooped. So, a lot of times when you find poop around an active feeding area, the deer's been up a while feeding around, it's strung out, or it's just individual pellets, and those are just active deer.
Man, he's hurting some feelings today. He's gonna make people mad at us.
I mean, I'm not trying to make anybody mad. I said, we're just trying to hope that something we say, is beneficial to somebody.
But Pawpaw said,
I know.
Oh, it's funny. Well, yeah, I know we kind of talked about this a little bit, but because you're kind of more in the realm of actively trying to put stuff in the ground to help deer, whether that's either with a prescribed burn or if that's actually planting or whatever. But could you maybe kind of touch on this like soil / nutrition limitations? Because before we turned the cameras and stuff on, we were talking about it, just what this episode was going to be about. And you'd said, look, it doesn't really matter to a degree. You want to give a deer or any wildlife anything that you can to help it, to get to its, like you said earlier, the genetic potential. But hey, man, it doesn't really matter what you feed it. It may not ever become Shaquille O'Neal.
Exactly.
So I guess if you could just like in the South, there are things that for the climate and the soil type tend to do better here. There are things that don't tend to do better here.
Right.
Could you just talk about what you can do from a soil and nutrition perspective to kind of help achieve?
Yeah. So on that topic real quick, I always go back to a study that Mississippi State did back in the mid 2000s. I think they started in the early 2000s because I was there. But they looked at the deer from 3 populations of 3 major geographic regions within the state. And they captured deer. They brought them into a captive environment, and they fed deer the same diet through multiple generations. And although there were great differences in body weights and antler scores from deer between the Mississippi Delta, which is highly fertile soil, I would compare that with anything in the Midwest. They produce some giants over there. The lower coastal plain, however, down in that sandy soil close to the beach, a 150-pound buck is a big buck. 180-pound buck's a giant.
Yeah.
They're consistently killing deer well in excess of 200 pounds in the Delta. Antler score is 150, 160, 170, even greater. 120-inch buck's a really big deer in the Boot Hill of Mississippi. So over time, they fed those deer the same diet. And what they noticed was with each generation of deer that were born in captivity on that same diet, they got closer and closer to the same antler scores and the same body weights.
Okay.
So there's no genetic limitations in the state of Mississippi. There's nutritional limitations in the state of Mississippi. And that's it's all according to your soil quality and soil fertility. And you can do all the soil amendments you want. You're not going to change that. So, that's why I tell people, don't worry about genetics. Just don't worry about the genetics. You're not going to change that. You're not going to really change your soil fertility. But what you can do is improve habitat so that the plants are bringing up the nutrients that are available and making them available to the deer. And, they'll grow to their potential in that particular region as long as you give them birthdays. And that's what it all boils back, or comes back to is birthdays. But, the name of my business is Habitat First, and that's because I place a lot of value and focus on maintaining vegetation and native plants and habitat over food plots and supplemental feeding. Not that those are bad things, that's not what I'm saying. But I think, they're exactly what they're called, supplements to what you're already doing. So if you can, improve the habitat on the place through vegetation, I tell, people from 4 feet and down, I want to see diversity and green stuff from chest high down.
Okay.
That's what's going to benefit deer. Not just with food, but with cover, bedding, fawning cover. They're getting food and protection, 4 feet and down.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting. So now I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit. So now you said, hey, look, there are no genetic limitations in Mississippi, but what about Alabama? So you're saying, given proper nutrition and given proper soil type, everything that these animals need, are you saying that we can, I know we're talking about harvest limitations and stuff too, but can Alabama grow the same deer that Illinois and Kansas and other places can grow?
They can grow deer to the same potential, but it's not going to, the bell curve is going to be totally different. What I mean by that, let's say that, your average antler score in central Kansas may be 145, 155. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be higher than here.
Sure.
If you look at average body weights, it's going to be higher than here. All things equal, if we had the same soil fertility, I'd say that we could easily grow what they're growing in Kansas or anywhere else in the Midwest. But, you'll occasionally see a 200-inch deer killed in Alabama. Most of the time they come from your more fertile areas.
Yeah.
The Black Belt, Tennessee Valley, Bankhead.
Oh gosh.
I mean,
let's not open up the Bankhead can of worms. You guys that are from Alabama, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not from Alabama and you happen to be listening to this, the legend as of late has been, you killed giants at Bankhead, and there's all kinds of memes. It's people like bringing in T-Rexes that were killed at Bankhead,
right.
Stuff like that. But I mean, there's some truth to that. I think that there's exceptions to every rule, but that's what they are. They're exceptions.
Exactly.
Michael Perry's a guy that killed a 185-inch deer during muzzleloader season a couple of years ago on Bankhead.
I've scored several deer off of Bankhead that were in excess of 190. Several. And
it's like, oh man, well we can do okay. All right, let's try this. Can you do that again in your lifetime?
Replicate it.
Can you do that again in your lifetime in the state of Alabama? No.
Probably not.
Probably not. I mean, you're talking about go buy a lottery ticket if you do.
Right. And let me put that into perspective for a minute. Nearly everybody that I know that has hunted in the Midwest for years has killed a 180 to 200 inch deer, if not multiple.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to happen eventually. Why? Because they're there.
Yeah.
You're not going to kill in Alabama what don't, exist.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's one thing I tell, why can't we kill 150 inch deer? Well, heck, man, you may only grow a 150 inch deer every 10 years.
Yeah.
And then you got to be lucky enough to kill him.
Look, yeah. I mean, I've said the same thing. If you are waiting in Alabama to pull the trigger on a deer that's 150 or better, you may go your entire life and never do that.
I'm hunting on what I would consider to be for Northwest Alabama jam up property. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've got a really great place. And in my lifetime, I started hunting when I was 9 or 10. Mm-hmm. I was 9. I started bow hunting when I was 14. So from now until 39 years of age, I can tell you without question that I've had 3 deer on camera that were in excess of 150 that entire time.
Yeah. Right. And then you're saying, like, this is great property.
Right. And I've only had opportunity to kill one of them. Mm-hmm. I saw one of those deer of the 3.
Yeah. I mentioned this on previous episodes, but the biggest deer I've ever seen in my life in Alabama, without question. I mean, it was 150-inch deer all day. It could have been more than that. I got a glimpse of him for maybe 3 seconds, maybe, chasing does on that lodge hunt thing I was talking about earlier. But the thing is, like, I started hunting with my dad when I was about, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Same deal, about 9, 10, 11-year-old, whatever. Seriously started trying to, like, really seriously bow hunt when I was 19. Mm-hmm. I'm 34. Like, I've laid eyes on one deer that'll go 150, and all that time, man, I'm out. I'm out. I'm not, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't care.
Well, like it's a goal of mine, and I'm going to do it. One day, if the Lord grants me enough days on this earth, I'm going to kill a 150-inch deer in the state of Alabama, and I'm going to do it on my place. I'm not going to do it on an invited hunt. I'm doing it on my place. It's going to happen. I mean, we can do it. We've had deer that I have absolutely zero doubt could hit 150, but they got killed at 3 or 4 years of age. And it happens every year, and all you can do is congratulate those folks and, tell them good job.
Right.
And that's all I'm going to do. I'm not not ill at anybody for shooting 130 or 40-inch deer.
No. Nobody could tell me anything if I killed one.
Absolutely not.
No, not at all. And I guess that's probably the kind of a follow-up with that is if you are a landowner and just say you have a smaller piece of property or something like that, you've got 40, 50 acres, we'll say less than 100 or something, what do you need to pat yourself on the back for, or I guess for in terms of harvest, or what do you need to kind of like pull the reins? Is it strictly the individual's criteria, or
a lot of times it is, people hunt for different reasons, and they're satisfied killing different age classes and sizes of deer. So it all comes back to what their objectives are. And most of the time, everybody that I talk to, we want to kill 3 to 4 year old deer. Most people are satisfied with that, and reasonably so. I think that's a reasonable expectation. Trying to get deer over 4 years of age, a lot of times is a futile effort.
Yeah.
I mean, it just depends on a lot of things. You got to have a lot of property. You got to have good neighbors, and I promote cooperatives. Get to know your neighbors. Don't make enemies out of your neighbors. It's not going to help you, and it's not going to help them.
Right.
You may start up, me and you may live beside each other. I may own 100, you may own 100 acres, and, I may want to kill big deer and you may not. That's fine. At some point in time, we're going to have to come to grips with it, and I'm not going to I can't live a life of being mad at you because you shoot every deer that I let walk. Right. I mean, you can't live that way.
No.
So get to know your neighbors and discuss these things, talk about them, and I think that there's a lot of common ground that people can come to rather than being upset with what everybody's killing.
Right.
And I see that a lot. I'm going to tell you what, deer cause more trouble.
Yeah.
They do. I mean, you want to make somebody upset. They may not show their anger to you in front of you, but when they go home and they're sitting at the dinner table talking to their wife, they're like, golly, man, he shot another one of them bucks. I can't believe that. It's just, it's human nature. It's what we do. We complain and gripe about everything. But, get to know people, talk about what you're trying to do, not in a condescending way. Nobody wins when you do that.
No, and I mean,
and you're only hurting yourself by being upset. They don't
yes.
care. I promise you, after you have that conversation, the other person doesn't care one bit.
That's exactly right. I was going to say that is a futile effort in a multitude of ways.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like, we talk about it at, church-related stuff is like holding a grudge,
Right.
is like drinking poison and hoping the
Oh,
other
yeah.
person dies.
Oh, yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
the same deal. Like, man, look, if you're going to be just torn out of the frame over somebody killing deer that you're letting walk, like,
Yeah.
you can't live your life like
No,
that.
and I'll admit, I've come full circle on that. I mean, I started out killing deer, and then I progressed into killing a little bit better deer, and then a little bit better deer. And then I was like, okay, I'm a trophy hunter now. That's all I can kill is trophy deer. And it was like, I made everybody miserable. Everybody around me was miserable. My family was miserable. My parents were miserable. My friends were miserable. I was miserable above all else. And I was like, I'm not living this way.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this. Just have fun. At the end of the day, it's a deer. Keep that into perspective. Of all the things we have to worry about on this earth,
That's right.
a deer should not be one of them.
No.
It should not be one of them. So
No, I had an opportunity. I ended up not getting in the lease, but there was a lease in in Mentone, extreme northeast part of the state, and it was going to be a bow hunting only lease, which is, by the way, it's like a unicorn chasing around something like that in Alabama. They don't exist. Like, I've looked and looked and looked. Like, I just want to find somewhere where all of us will bow hunt,
Yep.
And so, anyways, I was just kind of trying to pick the guy's brain that put the lease together, and was like, is anybody going to get mad at me if I shoot, a basket rack 8, or whatever? And he's a traditional bow guy and has killed a lot of deer. He's a cool dude. But anyway, he was like, dude, it's a deer. Like,
Right.
who cares?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And,
Oh, yeah.
and you don't hear that often.
Right.
Most of the time people, it'll be a $500 fine
Right.
if you shoot.
Well, see, we have harvest restrictions
Sure.
on most of the places that I help manage, but we might rib each other if somebody shoots a deer they shouldn't shoot, but it's all in fun.
Sure.
It's not like we're going to impose a fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not. It's not worth all that. No deer on earth is worth a ruined relationship, in my opinion.
No, it's not. And like you said, I do it because I enjoy it.
Right.
I enjoy having a bow in my hand. And honestly, I've said this for years, and this may be where the biologist pushes back a little bit, but I'm like, if you take a limited weapon like a bow and arrow to the woods every time you go hunting, that in and of itself is a management plan.
Absolutely.
Like, you can't kill enough deer with a bow to do damage. In my,
Right.
I don't know, maybe you can, but I'm just like, if you got rifles in the woods and and dust and everything that sets foot on a green field, then that's, you can probably do some damage there.
Absolutely.
But if you're a bow hunter, that is your management plan,
Right.
as far as like I'm concerned.
Right.
If I wanted to kill everything that stepped out
You're
from
still
me,
not gonna do it.
No, can't do it.
Not gonna do it.
So, anyways, but yeah, we've talked kind of like harvest criteria, data collection, how the importance of just collecting good data so that you can then make realistic expectations for your harvest. Soil and nutrition limitations. Before we move on from that, I want to kind of jump back into that for just a second. Could you give maybe the average landowner, like I said, sub 100 acres?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't answer that question.
Well, it's all right.
We got
chased
carried away.
rabbits.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
We'll come back to that.
See, what's something that is kind of economical, but also provides some nutrition that
Right.
that also holds up well in this climate
Right.
and soil type and that sort of thing? What's something?
I tell people not to make this complicated. Okay, don't make this too complicated. Deer need a few things. They need cover, they need water, they need food, and they need space. And if you can arrange the cover and the food, water is not a limiting factor in most of Alabama, most everywhere in the South. Water is not going to be a limiting factor. Even though we're in a drought right now, they still have water available to them. So if you can place food and cover in close proximity, even on smaller acreages, you will be a more successful hunter. Use things that deer prefer, and if you can provide diversity, I'm a pyromaniac. If y'all want to know what I do, I burn, and I burn stuff good. I love to burn. If I could just choose one management tool to use,
A torch.
it would be a drip torch.
Yeah.
And I would be so happy and content. And everybody else around me would be too. But, if you can incorporate burning and, setting back succession, if you can't burn, use a disc. Fall disking is a great option. I don't suggest that you mow your fields all the time, every year. That's what a lot of people do every fall. Late summer, early fall, mow our fields. Well, all you're doing is laying down more thatch. You're just laying down thatch year after year after year. You're not changing the vegetation. You're likely making growing conditions better for grasses. And you really want more forbs and legumes and vines and flowering plants and those types of things. So if you can break the soil or just burn off the top layer, or do both, that's going to expose seed that's been sitting in the seed bank for years, all types of things that deer really love, quail love, turkeys love. We focus on habitat. Now, as far as planting things, for fall food plots, I love any of the perennial clovers and oats, wheat, triticale, rye grain, not rye grass.
Okay.
For those of you folks planting Marshall ryegrass, stop it. I know deer eat it.
I'm pretty sure there's some planted at my house.
Oh, I know. Well, I've planted it. I had to plant it one year if I wanted a food plot, but because everything failed, it was just so dry. The only thing that would germinate in December was ryegrass. So if you want a green food plot, plant it. But there are so many other options out there that are better. I have a strong preference toward the perennial clovers as far as having something out there that's going to provide nutrition for 11 to 12 months out of the year. A lot of times in late July to early September, October, before the rains start coming, they can get kind of scarce and they'll go dormant or die back for a period of time. But it really just depends on the soil quality that you're in, the moisture that's there. So that's usually only a problem in your, higher elevation sites.
Yeah. Okay. And so, and shameless plug here, but I know everybody here is a pretty big fan of Vitalize seed. They've
Absolutely.
got some mixes that I asked you straight up one day. I was like, "What is it that you like about their mixes as opposed to other stuff?" And you said it has stuff that will provide food, forage, nutrition all year. Like there's something popping up throughout the course of a year, and that's kind of why
And the way they've got their seed mixes developed, they've got things that you can plant in succession behind each other at each season. So, you can come in with a spring-summer mix, and it's adding nitrogen to the soil. Then you come back with your fall mix, and it's using the nitrogen that has been added to the soil and laying down organic matter for your next nitrogen crop. So, it's just they go hand in hand. They really do well together.
Cool.
And the diversity that's in those mixes. The fall Vitalize seed mix, gosh, it's got like 14 different things in it.
Oh, wow.
It's a nice mix.
That's awesome.
Yep.
And all that seems to do well here too, right?
Oh, yeah, I've been planting it for 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does well.
Awesome. Well, cool, man. So I guess the last thing that we'll say here, and we kind of wrap things up, again, this was talking about harvest expectations for the South, and that can be different depending on the person. So I guess, what would you say to the person? We've talked about a lot of different things. Is that how am I going to take these principles or these things that we've talked about and apply them to my farm? My little whatever 40 acres that I get to hunt. What's the best kind of method for that?
Take a camera survey. Find out what you have. Just find out what you have, what's there. We can debate the ethics of baiting all day long, but if you want pictures of deer, use shelled corn. Just put out shelled corn. Don't try all this gimmicky stuff, all these products that they sell, they're deer attractants. Go buy cheap shelled corn and put it out. Find out what's there, and it will help you rein in your expectations. You can't kill what's not there. So find out what you have. And also understand that you're not the only one hunting those deer. So, I hear people all the time that have 15 acres and they're killing 7, 8, 10 deer off of it a year. That is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Do you have the legal right to do that? Absolutely. But how are you impacting the localized deer herd and the population? Imagine if everybody with 25 acres did that.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
And that's why they had to lower the doe harvest in the Tennessee Valley. Tennessee Valley is very developed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right here where we're at, Marshall County, Blount County, parts of Coleman County, Morgan County, very developed. There's a home on every hillside.
Yeah.
And there's very little cover for deer. There's pasture ground everywhere, cattle everywhere. So, you really have to be careful how many deer you're harvesting. So, for that 40-acre landowner, yeah, it may be legal to kill, 100-something does a year and $3, but should you?
Right.
Just think about the overall impact, and that's, I think it's hard for people to grasp that, especially in Alabama, because we're such a free state. Like, we have a lot of freedom. We have a lot of liberal, policies, and by liberal I mean, not a lot of restriction.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, rifle season.
Yeah.
Is there a longer rifle season in the country?
I'm not aware of one.
I don't think so.
No.
And I'm like, a lot of people will squawk about that. A lot of people go, well, if we would just rein in that rifle season, then we would have deer like Kansas does. And, and I'm not here to argue one way or another.
It would improve age structure.
It probably would. And I'm like, not too long ago, I believe Alabama was like number 2 in deer population. I mean, pretty recently, as like 2019 or something like that.
Right behind Texas,
yeah,
I think.
In deer density, which is crazy, by the way. That's something that's really hard to wrap my brain around, especially when you go sit somewhere 4 or 5 times in a row and not see a deer. Like, oh no, there's deer everywhere. You're just a bad hunter, I guess.
Well, it happens. My Saturday experience, I sat a place Saturday morning and again Sunday afternoon that I typically see no less than 12 deer, sometimes as many as, mid-20s, and I've seen 3 total.
Yeah.
I don't know what's up. The deer sign's there.
Yeah.
The cover's there. The food's there. No deer. They're just not showing in daylight hours.
Right.
So it happens. But, I hit panic mode when the state of Alabama gave the 10 days of February hunting in North Alabama.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, I had a problem with it. Still do.
Oh, really?
Major. Yeah, I do.
The problem is what?
Well, I just don't think that the reasons used are justifiable reasons to pass that.
I got you. Well, I mean, for me, the frustrating part was at the time when that happened, I was hunting primarily Jackson County.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys can say what you want about this stuff. I'm just telling you, I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. Like, deer didn't rut. Like, they didn't. You would hunt the entire, what was supposed to be the rut. It was supposed to be, oh man, bucks are going to be chasing does, deer running everywhere. And it just didn't happen.
Right.
And then you would get into turkey season and you'd have trail camera pictures of deer running wild, and you'd still have scrapes everywhere and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, man, I wish we could, extend this on out just a little bit, you know what I mean, and have a little bit more of a chance. And when they did it, it was like, oh.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say there's not areas where it was justified, but statewide, absolutely not. And my reason's because you've got, in the majority of central and north Alabama, you've got between a late December, with the exception of Bankhead and a few other areas where you've got earlier ruts, but late December to mid to late January is the peak breeding season. Then you are making bucks eligible for harvest 10 days into February after the completion of the rut, when they are absolutely enslaved to their stomachs. And we've got cell cameras and bait everywhere, and 10 more days of rifle season. You can kill every deer on a place.
In those 10 days.
You can kill every deer on a place in those 10 days. I've seen it. You can do it. So the only deer that don't get shot are the ones that you don't want to shoot.
Yeah.
So I think that it's going to lead to even more sex ratios that are skewed heavily toward females. And there's shed bucks being shot. Like 10 to 15% of the bucks that I see brought into processors in North Alabama are shed bucks.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Man, that's wild.
Yep. And those are native deer. Those are not, those are not the bankhead deer. Those are native Alabama deer
Right.
that are shedding in late January to early February.
Wow. That's
Now, those are the exceptions. If you looked at on a bell curve, those are the first few that start to shed. Most of them are going to shed in March.
Right.
But, it's happening.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like there could be a part 2 to this coming up.
I mean, we could talk about this for
Right.
episodes.
Yeah, we could.
Several.
Cool, man. Well, guys, that's pretty much going to wrap this up. I appreciate you guys listening in. We've got a lot of stuff coming up here pretty soon. I know that Matt and Jeremy are both heading to Kansas here in the next few weeks because that's where the big ones live.
I got to kill one in Alabama first.
That's true. Yeah, we got to go in Alabama. And I'm getting to go on an SOA hunt, which I'm pretty excited about. If you guys aren't familiar with those, it's a special opportunity area. So you get to put in for some public land that, the only people that get to hunt it is people that get drawn. And so a friend of mine was very generous to take me with him because I didn't get drawn for anything, but he drew. And so he's going to take us down to a place in deep South Alabama. So I'm pretty excited about what that looks like in a couple weeks. But guys, stick around. I know that we've talked about a lot of hunting content lately, and I'm going to keep saying this. That's the season we're in right now is hunting season, but that is not what this podcast and what this brand Southern U is going to be. It just happens to be where we are when we launched. But you're going to hear a lot more about diversifying your habitat and improving your habitat, way beyond just wildlife and those sort of things. Ways to improve, like we said, soil quality or timber production if you've got an investment property that you're trying to get the most out of, any of those type things. If you're a farmer and you're trying to plant, trying to get the highest yield that you can, we're going to be talking about some of that stuff too. Herbicides, all kinds of good stuff. So we appreciate you guys hanging out, and we will see you guys for episode number 4 here in 2 weeks.
Later, Gator.
Thanks, guys.